Good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas, and today we're going to talk about color, cyc lights, and pyrotechnics on Light Talk.
Let's blow something up, baby.
Yeah, like me.
This is David in Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
Humans as lumens.
Hey, well, first, before we get started today, I just want to say that Driscoll Otto is some kid, isn't he? He's a rambunctious junior, isn't he? That was a great interview, man. I thought
he had good stuff to say.
Well,
good stuff.
You know, what's so interesting is the stuff about what's happening now, and also
those cameras, the cameras he talked about. Yeah, I'm looking at reading.
It's really cheap. Yeah. They're really cheap. I think I told my master electrician we're buying this because we have to check it out. I think it's called Lightform. Is that what it's called?
Lightform, and then there was another one he mentioned I've been reading about also. That looks pretty cool. And did he talk much about the difference, Dave? Because you've talked about it before, the AR VR thing.
We didn't really talk about that, to tell you the truth. We should have, but we didn't really get into it. You know what's also fascinating was how he pulled together La Donna del Lago at the Met when they were talking about this difference in styles, and he ended up oil painting everything.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't say it during the show, but I wanted to mention the movie Loving Vincent. Have you guys seen that?
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it's like what he talked about. It's the brushstrokes come alive and the paintings are shimmering and the characters are alive. And I highly recommend it, David. And I made me think of it when he talked about that, the oil painting brushstrokes that he used. And I thought about Loving Vincent, whether he did it first and they copied him, or whether they did it first and he got that wind of that. Either way, it's brilliant.
Well, anyway, we've got to actually get started because I got a call from Miles Dungeon, who is actually one of the big wigs over at German Light Products. And he told me about their GLP S350 because he said that they have solved the frost issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he invited me to their big barbecue today. I'm looking forward to checking it out. So I'm heading out there as soon as we finish today. I don't know if you knew this, Stan, but that strobe light they have a new software update that increases the intensity
Makes it even brighter.
180%.
Okay, I'm gonna write a sponsor. I'm gonna call it the Caesar Strobe. Caesar Strobes.
Strobe that will neutralize anybody, and certainly it will sterilize anyone. So.
No, strobes of seizures.
Anyway.
I'll come up with something.
Steve, you have the first listener question today.
We have a question from Tina in Los Angeles. And she says, what do you say when a director says that she does not like your color? Well, there's a couple answers there. If it's in pre-production, then the two of you have a great deal of time to work through the color ideas on the show and come to a compromise or come to a change. If you're talking about at the tech rehearsal, then I think at that point you're pretty far into the process, and you may not be able to change, and that could be problematic. I mean, if you've got a red cyc and they want a pink cyc, ultimately you're going to have to change that color or walk away from the show. So I think pre-production is the time to work out all these color issues with the costume designer by doing some color tests, by looking at actors' skin in pre-production in your light lab. But a lot of this can be solved with a little bit of work up front. What do you guys think?
I totally agree with you, Steve. It's in the pre-production phase, but I did want to add a little something to that, and I'm going to quote my friend Joseph Albers again. And all color is interactive, and so you can't make color decisions in isolation. You have to look at things together. So that process by which you look at the scenery, the costumes, and the color of the light all together is really what the response is. And you may not see that till tech, but you can do a lot of mock-ups. And I think that's a really important point to start doing that early, but not with words. Please don't describe color with words. Don't tell me, show me, and then we'll have a react. And then you have a reaction.
You know, my dear brothers, I love you to death. I think your answers are brilliant, but I don't think you read the question correctly. She asks, so what do you say when a director says that she does not like color
I'll
not
change
your color. No, she doesn't like color.
Oh,
You've heard
well,
this
that's
before.
absurd. Oh,
Well, no.
oh.
Yeah, I think where this comes from is that some people have had bad experiences with lighting designers who completely destroy costumes with bad color. Usually amber is to blame.
Yes. Marmalade lighting is to blame.
Now, I have met many directors who are very, very reluctant, until they know the way I work, to actually trust that. You show them a strong color, they say, I don't know. Well, let's look at it. Now, especially nowadays when color is the easiest thing to change in the world, if you have moving lights and LED and stuff like that. But I think that's where this question comes from. Now, again, your answers were fantastic when it comes to like not liking your color. But I believe, what you have to do is you have to convince the director to trust you. And one of the ways you can do that is you can show some of those colors in Light Labs. You can bring some costumes in, take a look at it, so that you don't kill the costumes and you certainly don't kill the skin tones. That's why I'm going to say the words in CRI, and Stan, you're going to say TM30, right?
TM30, which now has a flesh metric.
Ooh, a flesh metrics.
Flesh metric.
That's the name of this episode, Flesh
Fleshier metrics.
The metrics of flesh. Anyway, I think it's important to show that, to ease their pain so that they calm down and just look at color for what it is. And be brilliant. Get ready to change it fast. All right, Stan, you have the next question.
I do, from Ashley in freezing Chicago. And she wants to know, what is my favorite strip light I like to use on a cyc? Well, I don't know if I have a favorite. It always comes back to that three-legged stool: quality, money, preference. We went through this about 2 years ago. Steve and I had a long conversation, and I really liked the what are they called? But they're really expensive chroma cues, right? And I couldn't really afford the chroma cues, but they're really beautiful. And then I looked at the ETC products, which are very, very lovely, but they're not so inexpensive. And then Steve told me about the show lines from Philips, and I really said, you know what? For the quality of the light and the build quality and the cost, it was a no-brainer for me. So I ended up landing on show lines from Philips, and we're pretty happy with it. The only thing I would wish about them, because I like to sometimes not just use them for the cyc, we don't even focus them directly at the cyc. They're so bright, we just focus them straight down, and it's the ambient light that lights the cyc, so it sort of has an indirect quality, which I really love. It's nice and smooth, but I only wish they had one thing, because we like to sometimes use them as backlight bars, right? And they just got a lot of flair. So we're probably going to ask City Theatrical at some point to make us a set of custom barn doors for those 640s and 660s. But we're pretty pleased with them. In our small space, we can't get them above 10% because they're so bright.
Wow.
So lots of headroom there. And I know you guys like bright, and I am enjoying the brightness of those and the color quality. We're really good. They're really good. So I guess they're my favorites because I own them. They've got 96 feet of them.
I really like the Robert Juliat Deus 860s. These are terrific LED strip lights. They come in single and dual rows of elements. We used them last year in Central City, and they were fantastic. Amazing color rendition, very, very, very good dimming curves, and they're super intense, which is fantastic too. So yeah, I highly recommend them. If you have the room and you don't want to go something different from strip lights, ETC has that wonderful new little unit that lights cycs. What is it called, gentlemen?
Oh, well, there's a couple. There's the color source. There's the Celador.
Color source.
Yeah, but the color source I think they're less expensive, and they're very nice.
And what we use at school are actually the cyc attachments for their LED Licos. We have like 8 of them on the floor that covers the whole thing. It's really, really great. So you have a lot of options now to light cycs. If you have the room and you already have LED Licos, then I think those attachments work really well, those cyc attachments.
Yeah, they do. If you just want to get a color wash nice and even.
Right.
But I think if you want to do anything else like gradients or color moving across the sky or any kind of pixel-based effects that you can pixel map across the LEDs. We love that.
I know. That is great. And that has changed everything. Boy, if I had that in the 70s, wow.
Forget it. You'd have been everybody been hiring you just for that.
Yeah, really. Hey, we can go back in time. Make a Lumen Brothers Time Machine. I see a sponsor. Anyway,
you know what? Yeah,
we
should do that. We should do those time capsules where we put all of our stuff into a bottle and bury it for 50 years.
There you go, and then come back somehow. I don't know. Anyway, our next question is from David in Chicago, another Chicago writer. How do you like that?
Chicago they need something to do. It's freezing up there like crazy.
It's unbelievably cold, and I'm glad both you guys made it home alive. By the way. Because I was really concerned.
Just in time.
I was concerned. Anyway, David from Chicago writes, why does it drive me crazy when I see contemporary lights in period movies or television shows? I was watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel the other night, and there is the Source 4 lighting fixture lighting Lenny Bruce.
I saw that.
WTF? Question mark. What does WTF mean? Anyway.
What's the focus?
Oh, there you go. Interesting question. Actually, we got this on our Light Talk page, and it actually came from David. So we moved it into a question because it's interesting. It seems to me, especially in this particular instance, where The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, by the way, which is a fantastic series.
My wife loves it.
Oh, it's great. And, it's really classic and beautifully acted and well written, and the art direction is sublime. I'm sure they've won Emmys for it. It is just amazing art direction. But with all that period art direction, in several instances, sure enough, during the nightclub scenes, there is a contemporary lighting fixture. There are also period lighting fixtures, which I don't get. If they're going to take the time to have some period lighting fixtures, why not have them all period? But these are really obvious things. Now, so why does it drive you crazy? Because you're not listening to the show, watching the show.
If the show was so good, you wouldn't be paying attention to the source.
That's right. But something, we can't help ourselves because we're lighting designers, right?
Right.
So we're always looking at these things like,
we're a small segment of the audience.
Yeah,
sure.
They don't care. But it also happened in that wonderful movie last year, Bohemian Rhapsody. There was this big discussion on a lot of the lighting boards about the Live Aid concert, and the fixtures on the side, the moving lights, were Verilights, or we think they were Verilights, that were made like 10 years after Live Aid. So we're wondering, what is this? What's going on? Well, I don't know. What do you think it is, guys?
I think they just might not have a lot of vintage fixtures, theatrical vintage fixtures laying around.
But you see, in this one particular case, and again, if you go on the Light Talk Facebook page, you will see it's a single light that is in the camera shot, obviously,
right.
that is shooting onto the stage. They could have done anything to make it look not like a Source 4. They could have even done it in post, for God's sake.
Oh, you think so?
Absolutely. Or they could have put a shell around it, something. It would have been a lot better than having an obvious Source 4 out there. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe, like Stan says, we are such a small audience that they don't care. They figure out who's going to notice this. But that's so hard to believe. It's with shows this popular, and especially the high quality of art direction, why they would let that go or make that decision.
It would have been cool to see an old Kliegel, step lens fixture or something. Yeah. We should bring this up with Joel Rubin during his interview. It's like, where have all the old Kliegels gone?
Where have all the old Kliegels gone? That's a song, I think, from the 40s.
What happened to Kliegel?
What happened to Kliegel?
We're going to find out. Well,
anyway, David from Chicago, all I can tell you is that, no, you're not crazy. And it does drive me crazy, too, to be honest with you, because nobody cares about us.
Well, let me just tell you that you are listening to Light Talk with Steve, Stan, and David. And we are the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by...
From the makers of the Cone of Silence, Wilmette Corporation, comes the answer to the International Lighting Designer Traveler's Blues. The full head virtual isolation helmet. Are international flights getting you down? Wasn't international travel supposed to be glamorous? remembered those romantic fantasies about working internationally so that you could meet interesting people on the airplane and dine in luxury. Well, silly person, that was all before children were manufactured with super vocal cords, allowing them to scream for 14 hours straight. Before airlines would regularly cancel flights and reroute you through some third world country, waiting for your connection in airports without indoor plumbing, or sit you in the middle seat between Paul Prudhomme and the guy who was struck by lightning. How do you escape this madness and travel peacefully once again? Well, the answer is Whamit's new full-head virtual isolation helmet. The full-head virtual isolation helmet completely covers your head with an aluminum shield that serves as a 360-degree virtual reality device. The full-head virtual isolation helmet will create an alternate environment for those annoying airport and airline experiences. You may ask, well, how do I see with the full-head helmet? Well, there really is no need to see anything. The licensed Tesla autopilot system guides you through the airport from check-in, through security, to your gate, and right into your seat. For those who are nervous about going through security, custom helmet decals feature the faces of your favorite celebrity so that TSA is not suspicious and ends up arresting you. Once on the airplane, the full-head virtual isolation helmet will create an environment free from the annoying visions and audible senses like children crying, people begging for money, and of course, that loud, obnoxious American cook who is sitting next to you. And if you have to visit the bathroom, our integrated GPS will follow simple voice commands like, I have to go to the bathroom, or, hey, let's scare that crying child when I pass by, or, let's accidentally spill my drink on the lap of that obnoxious person sitting next to me. Nothing like flying for 16 hours with a wet crotch. When it's time to sleep, our internal vaporizer will fill the helmet with herbal scented vapor, or use your own personal user-supplied cartridges to release their magic soothing effect, calming you and quickly putting you to sleep. And when you wake up hungry, why eat that horrible airline food? Internal food tubes feed you the most succulent nutritional fare. Try our new Mama's Meatloaf, Don Holder's Fish Cakes, or Turkey Loaf Supreme. Kosher dishes like Stan's gefilte fish are also available. So take international flying back to the 1960s when America was great. Use Whamit's full-head virtual isolation helmet on your next flight to Italy. The only thing better is business class on Singapore Airlines.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Oh my God, you guys hear that? They're back. The ducks, they're back.
Thank goodness.
Oh my God.
I need them.
You need them for all the PETA listeners out there.
I love the
Stan
ducks.
did not
I do.
kill the ducks. He loves the ducks.
I love them. We were just joking. I love the ducks.
Matter of fact, he just paid to send them to a 1-week duck vacation in Alaska.
That's right.
So in the coldest part of the year. By the way, Stan, that the
They
ducks
have great feathers.
Yeah,
they walk warm.
But you sent them to a very cold place. The whole idea is that ducks, they migrate down. They migrate
It's like
south.
snow off a duck's back.
Okay, well, anyway. So they're back. So all this carnivorous, brutish behavior was just a show. Obviously,
Just a sham.
we knew that you had a soft heart, Stan. So
Especially for duckies.
thank God those ducks are back, because now we can once again do our Let's Talk About segment. And this week, we will tackle the issue of when does the lighting and projections designer enter into the creative process?
Yesterday.
I think this comes from, actually, we've had several people talk about this and ask us this question, is lighting designers seem to come in late in a lot of cases. The set may already have been designed. Maybe it's 2 weeks from load-in. You get a call, hey, would you like to do this show? That's happened to me, by the way. And it's like you're left out of that whole process. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I only have a couple of words. Early as possible.
But why do you think that's not happening in all cases?
Oh, you mean to diagnose the reason?
Yes, we got to actually get into the root of the issue.
The root of the question. Why?
So I think the deal here is a lot of directors are very comfortable working pretty early in the process with the set designer and possibly even the projection designer working out the landscape of the show. So I think traditionally you've seen that. set designer comes on board, they work up the ground plan, they work up a model, they talk through what they're going to do, and then, frankly, they bring the costume designer in before they bring in the lighting designer. So typically, the lighting designer comes in pretty late.
Yeah.
It depends on, a lot of my work now is with new plays. So I'm actually at the early script development of plays being done. There's a rough script. I sit down with the director who's going to be working on that. I sit down with the playwright, and actually the set designers in the room and the costume designers in the room with us also. So we hear that. Then we come back a few weeks later when revisions are done. So I think it depends on the nature of the show. If I'm doing a runway show, then I'm involved pretty early in the process. If I'm doing dance, pretty early in the process. But unless, and I don't do new opera. I work on a regional level, and those things, can be rough at times. You go into it and they say we're doing the 1952 La Scala La Bohème, and a lot of those decisions are made going into it, and they don't want to see something else. Those companies have limited budgets, and so you're coming in a bit as a lighting designer. You're coming in a bit as a workman rather than a creative artist. And you've been there, David. I mean, I'm sure not often, but it's here is load in, here is tech, there's a SIDS probe, and by the way, we're going to dress it and then we open it. So they move very fast.
It's funny because when I was young, I used to do a lot of rented sets, and they would always hire me because I would always be able to make them look good. Usually by taking light off of them, by the way. So unfortunately, what that meant was I got this reputation of making crappy scenery look good, so they would only hire me to light crappy scenery. So that was unfortunate. It took me a while to break out of that.
I did want to add something because Steve mentioned something at the very beginning of his comment that I want to pick up on. And then all the specifics that you mentioned are really also insightful. But maybe there's something also about just human nature in the sense that generally people are familiar with architecture. They walk through doors, they open windows, they sit on furniture, they clean the floor. So the set is somehow already something they feel that they understand. The same can be said for clothing. People wear clothes. They get dressed every morning. They buy clothes. There's sort of a direct connection. But light, as for most people, and even if you're it's a switch on the wall. There's not a lot of sort of, unless you're a photographer or unless you really sort of pay attention to it, sometimes it's just utilitarian, sometimes it's just always there. So maybe there's a tendency to, you as a person, just to gravitate to the things that you comprehend better. And sometimes I think lighting designers, I try not to be guilty of this myself, is we sometimes speak in lingo, which makes it difficult. So I try to encourage my students to not use lighting terms that we talk about when we're talking shop, but to speak in dramaturgical terms, to talk in poetry, to talk in mood, to use words that are understandable so that you don't build this sort of disconnection. And maybe that's part of the reason. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I think those are really good points, Stan. But I can sort of narrow this down into 2 or 3 things here. It depends on the director. Sure. When you work with Paul Curran, and my students have asked them, how do you choose your team, your lighting designer, your set designer, your costume designer, projections designer? And he says, he always answers, I choose them because they think like directors. So if a director comes into the project with collaborators who are also directors, then he's going to, or she's going to want these people to be in early on the process. And that's always the case with Paul and me, and I'm sure with Driscoll as well, and everyone else that Paul works with, Kevin Knight, et cetera. Now, I think the other problem is the way a lot of universities teach this when they do their own productions. Now, not in all cases, I'm not saying this is the fact, but they feel just because this has happened in the past means that this is the way it is now, or it should be in the future. What we do at our university is that we insist that all early design meetings include all the designers. Even if the lighting designer has nothing to say, which I'm sure they will have something to say because they're thinking about it as a director, that they are involved. I was sitting in one of those meetings, and the lighting designer, the first meeting actually, came up with the end of the show, immediately came up with an idea that was more scenic in nature, scenic
Yeah,
end lighting. And that idea now has continued. Now, this I think that directors who don't follow that, who don't look at the team as a team from day one, are cheating themselves.
That's how we work. We work like that too.
So I think the schools need to change and insist. I mean, it's basically a policy that even, when guest direct, because we use mostly guest directors, they come in and we say, no, you don't meet just with the set designer. You meet with the costume designer, lighting designer, and projection designer as well. That's just the way it is. So people get used to that. And directors, like I said, most good directors will work that way.
Okay, Carla in New Mexico says, what do you say when the theater wants you to handle all the pyrotechnics?
Run away!
No.
Well, Carla, back in the day, I actually did pyrotechnics, and it was kind of the Wild West, and it was a bit of learning on your own, experimentation, and, there were no rules. The only rules were, you had to adhere to what the fire marshal said. And I think that evolved into a situation where the industry started growing up. And all of a sudden, I think if you think about doing things today, there's a couple things I would consider. And again, I'm speaking, years away from my experience. So I'm sure there are people who could answer this better. But it's my understanding these days that if you're going to do pyrotechnics, you have to be at least 18 years old.
Yes.
And I think David might know this answer also. But as I remember, in California, you have to have a license to be an apprentice. So you have to have an apprenticeship license before you can be a licensed pyrotechnician. And that apprenticeship takes about 2 years. I would say something also that people are very aware of that they weren't in my day because we were just kind of silly. I think you're going to have a pretty serious insurance policy if you're going to do pyrotechnics. And, for me, I would be covered. If I were doing it today, I would have at least a $3 to $5 million policy covering my work as a pyrotechnician. You're going to also have, so again, getting back to that question, what if the theater asks you to do it? I mean, you're probably not legally capable of doing it. These days you have to get a show certificate, and that usually comes from the fire marshal. In a smaller town, it might come from the fire chief, or it might come actually from the police chief. So it's not just walking in with some cables and some squibs, and you could have all the knowledge in the world, but you have to legally be able to do it, which actually brings me to the next point. If you're not running the show yourself, you're going to have someone also licensed to run the show. And depending on what your license is, you might have to have someone with a higher degree license to supervise you while you're running the show. And of course, back in the day, everything was laid out for the fire marshal. So if you had, 5 mid-air explosions, then, we would make 10 or 12. And the fire marshal would come by and select one and say, let's see this one fire. And then the fire marshal would pick out the 5 you're going to use for the show. And then the others would be disposed of. So you couldn't just go, well, now that the fire marshal's gone, let's bring out the real stuff. And again, finally, it's an expensive venture to get into this. Because you are, you don't want homemade flash pots. There's just so much responsibility and so much liability that goes into this. And I don't know how old you are, but you can find it online. And this is a pyrotechnician who was incredibly experienced and all the money in the world and licensing and just expert in what they're doing. Go back and look at that Pepsi commercial from 1984 starring Michael Jackson. A pyro effect went off over his head, some sparks fell down and caught his hair on fire and, burned him terribly on the top of his head. And that's coming from special effects artists who really knew what they were doing. So accidents can happen, and I would never agree to do pyrotechnics for the community theater or the local Nutcracker without some serious training behind me.
And what's worse than that is back in 2003, there was a nightclub in Rhode Island called The Station. and they had yahoos running the pyrotechnics for a band called Great White. And this was in a room that had sound insulation that was not fireproofed on the ceiling. It also had no sprinkler system. And the whole place went up in less than a minute and killed 100 people and injured over 187 people. Actually, the whole thing was filmed, by the way. There was a TV crew in there. They were actually doing a report on fire safety in these nightclubs. And that night, this whole nightclub went up, and you could watch the whole thing on YouTube. But that was someone who had no idea what they were doing. They set off 3 fountains, and the whole place went up. Now, one of the reasons why I mentioned that is a long time ago, when you'd get a contract to be the lighting designer, it would say that you're responsible for all lighting and special effects. I remember this. It was in all my contracts. And I started to cross this out because I am not a pyrotechnician. I am not licensed, and nor do I even want to be, to tell you the truth. So to answer your question, do you want to do it? Do you want to handle all that? Only if you love it. Because Steve is right. It takes a lot of study, and you have to be really at the top of your game.
There's a couple places you could study. I think Lemaitre still offers a training course for pyrotechnics. And, I couldn't track anything down really in the United States. But when I started looking at England, of all places, they have the Association of Stage Pyrotechnicians. And they're pretty serious about this. So it's a training program, a certification. And also there are different licenses. You can get a license to shoot fireworks. And that's a different type of pyrotechnician than at a backstage event. And I guess, I would, again, without this, I would not do it. I would not jump in there. There's 2 types of pyrotechnics also for the stage. There is what they consider the professional pyrotechnics line, if you're talking to a fire marshal. And then there's also the consumer line, and that doesn't require a license. But I wouldn't even monkey around with the consumer line without really knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, so I would just add this. I was quite the pyro tinkerer earlier.
I bet
in my
you set a
career.
lot of dumpsters on fire.
And I did some really stupid things. We would take some wire, and we take a single strand of copper, and we put it between 2 nails, and we send 110 through it to get a spark to then light up the powder, and like Steve said, flash pot. So I was pretty risky and stupid back then. But I do want to mention this. So I have a student currently in the program right now, and when I recruited her, she said, listen, I'm going to need July 4th off my 3 years in grad school because I'm interested in pyrotechnics, and I apprentice, as Steve mentioned, with a very large fireworks company every summer, every 4th of July. And she is getting trained through working with that organization. And I think that's really pretty great, and it will make her unique. And in terms of truly having those skills. In New York City, where I was growing up, the way in which you went up the line to become sort of, able to do that safely is you would have to take an exam. And in New York, it was the blasting unit of the Department of Buildings, right? The same people who do demolition is the route you would have to go to get those certifications and appropriate thing to sort of do it on stage.
Let me just say that New York exam, I took that exam because I was in Connecticut doing pyro for the Hartford Ballet. But again, that exam, that's like, okay, you've got hard-packed red Georgia clay, and you want to blast a 3-inch hole 2 feet down. So this was like the Brooklyn Bridge needs to be demolished, and how many pounds of TNT and at what locations and at what speed. I mean, that was.
You took that test?
Yes,
did you pass?
Yes, but that was useless for me because I could go out. I could go out and blow up some rocks, but oh man! So
well, Steve, it's not useless for me. You could blow up our theater right now. Hey guys, that Hammond organ solo tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk fun.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions on this podcast.
And in case Steve blows you up and you decide to litigate, our solid-state law firm of Cobb, Driver, and Ray will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and deep in the heart of Texas.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss, have you had the chance to work with Roscoe Optosculpt? I need to tame my psych. Hey, how do you use a top hat? And my cable is covered with tape and goo. How do you clean this mess off?
All that and the new sponsor, Light Talk, is broadcasting very questionable and explosive Lumen knowledge around the
I'm
world.
explosive, baby. We will see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk. Bye,
So long,
everyone.
everyone.